All right, everyone, it is 7 o'clock, so let's get started. My name is Lee. I am the chair of the Planning, Zoning, and Transportation Committee. And with me tonight, I have some fellow commissioners, if you would like to introduce yourselves. We'll start with you, Margaret.
Hello, I'm Commissioner Stevens and I represent 1C05. We're at the back of the zoo and bordered by Rock Creek Park and the Walter Pierce Park.
This is Daniel Michelson Horowitz. I represent 1C01, which is bordered by Wyoming on the north and Florida on the south. And on the east, it includes the wedge where the Mint Gym is on the CVS, where Florida hits California, and on the west to Columbia Road. So I've got, for the folks on here who are on Columbia Road, I've got the east side of Columbia Road, the even numbers up to Wyoming.
Thanks, Commissioner Jake Falaschini, 1C07, which is basically 18th to 17th from Florida up to Columbia with some zigs and zags here and there.
Great, and like I said, I'm Lee Dixon. I represent 1C02, which is the wedge between Columbia and Connecticut up to Belmont. Tonight, we just have one agenda item, and that is to discuss a presentation by Kevin from DDOT about the bus priority project. So Kevin, if you want to raise your hand so Sean can make you a panelist so we can hear your presentation.
Hey, good evening.
Hi, Kevin.
Hi. Thanks for the introduction. Thanks for the invitation to come and give you all an update on what we've been working on over at DDOT in regards to the Columbia Road Bus Priority Project. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Sorry, I'm a Teams person, not as strong of a Zoom user, so pardon the slow moving screen share. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, great. And I'm just gonna leave it in the editing mode just because it's a little easier to manage the screens and things. So again, thanks for having me here this evening. I have a relatively short agenda for my presentation. Just want to, reiterate the project goals. And, the last time we spoke, DDOT was in the process of evaluating concepts. We've since selected a concept to move into design and then construction. And I wanted to provide an update on what's changed since then. And for anybody who missed previous presentations, it's all those presentations are available on the project website. And I encourage you to check those out for more information. So the first step in this project was a needs assessment in which we established, what are the problems that we're trying to solve through this project? And what are the goals for this project? And something that we heard a lot through community feedback and through reviewing the crash records for all of the crashes that have occurred in this corridor on Columbia Road was that people would like to see improved safety for vulnerable roadway users. And when I talk about vulnerable roadway users, I'm generally referring to people walking and biking, because in every crash which was recorded involving them on Columbia Road, there was an injury that resulted. So that's what makes them highly vulnerable. And then also to reduce travel time for people riding the bus. The average travel time for buses through the corridor is less than 6 miles per hour. It's one of the slowest corridors in the district for bus riders. and they number about 6,000 people, between the various Metro bus lines plus the circulator line that run through this area. And the other thing is that we would like to better accommodate commercial loading and access through the corridor. Something that was also frequently cited in public feedback was that, the trucks unloading in the center of the roadway really limit visibility. There's at least one recorded crash in which a freight delivery person was hit by a car in the process of doing their job. And so we want to make sure that there's, to the extent possible, space accessible for people who need to access businesses along the corridor. So as I mentioned, last fall, we presented on different concepts that we looked at for the corridor, and we put forward one proposal, which you can see on the screen here. The main feature of it is protected bike lanes through most of the corridor. The one exception is in the southwest bound direction approaching Connecticut Avenue, where it would become a shared bus and bike lane. Little preview in terms of proposed revisions to the design is there's some changes in the extents of that bus lane, but that's the general idea that we're moving forward. And I wanted to provide some detail on some of the different refinements that we're proposing to the conceptual design at this point. We've done a lot more traffic analysis since the concepts were initially developed, and in selecting a concept to move forward, that was informed by some extensive traffic analysis. And one of the important things that we wanted to look at is, would it be feasible to have this protected bike lane connect all the way to 15th Street, where there's an existing bike lane, a bike facility, and making this connection between 16th and 15th Street would be important for completing this network connection. Of course, we're always working to further expand the network of safe bicycle facilities in the district, and we for the time being want to complete this connection. And that is something that was deemed feasible through our traffic analysis. However, it will have some parking impacts, and so there will be more kind of focused public feedback or public outreach. That's a neighboring ANC, that's ANC 1A. So we'll reach out to them and some of those properties along these two blocks. The other thing that we looked at was a major source of delay for buses making that left turn onto Little Harvard. So sorry, this is a little bit in the weeds, but wanted to give you an update on what we've been working on. And so the way that Columbia Road works right now when you're heading east is when 16th Street has green lights going north and south, there's a red light at Little Harvard, the little jog around the park there to connect up to Mount Pleasant. And so that's a red light, so you're not allowed to make a left turn there. So we're proposing to have a permissive left turn at that intersection so that, there's no conflict with Columbia Road because it's stopped, but people will be able to make the left turn and just watch for cars coming off of 16th Street. Right now, there's no gaps, or there's often not a gap big enough for a bus to make a left turn there. And so we're adding this permissive phase where there will be a flashing yellow arrow while Columbia Road has a red light, same as it does today. One of the other things that we're proposing at this point is south of Columbia Road, Ontario Road is one-way northbound, and on the north side of Columbia Road, Ontario Road is two-way. We are proposing to make it one-way northbound. The reason for this is that it will simplify the intersection operations. Right now, because it's an offset intersection, where the two sides of Ontario Road are not aligned. We can't run both sides of them at the same time in one signal phase. So we have to have a signal phase just for the south side of Ontario Road, and then another phase just for the north side. And so if we make them both one way, we can have one signal phase to let traffic move through Ontario Road. That will allow us to shorten the cycle, reduce wait times for pedestrians, people walking, people biking. Right now, it's a confusing place to walk through because, as a pedestrian, you feel like you should be able to cross some of these streets. It's unclear what the conflict is. Now it'll be a lot more, or under this proposal, it would be a lot more clear. And so right now on the south side of Columbia Road on Ontario, you've got parking on both sides of the street, plus a contraflow bike lane so that you preserve the circulation by bicycle. But for general purpose traffic, it'll be one-way northbound, and we would propose to do the same thing on the north side of Columbia Road. While I've got this bit of map, one thing that we're also taking a look at is this last block of Champlain Street between Euclid and Columbia Road. An idea that's been brought forward recently is the idea of potentially closing that and having that as a space for pedestrians, and expanding that space for potential activation in the future. So that's something that we're analyzing at this point, and are gonna see if it's feasible and get a better understanding of what are the impacts of that sort of thing. Another one of the refinements that we're working on is also regarding traffic signals. And so what we're proposing to do is have it be at the intersection of 18th Street, Columbia Road, and then it's Adams Mill Road on the north side of Columbia Road. Make it so that when Columbia Road has the walk sign for pedestrians crossing Adams Mill Road, and then also when bicycles are able to cross Adams Mill Road, at that point, right turns will not be permitted. Right now, so it'll be a red arrow. Right now, it's a permissive movement. You can make that right turn. You just have to yield to pedestrians. And we are proposing to prohibit it just so that there's less confusion, and that right turn will predominantly occur at the same time as Adams Mill southbound can make the left onto Columbia Road, which is similar to how it is now. They currently have that protected phase, but this will make it so that they're not also trying to get across while people are walking across the street. And one of the final major changes to the proposed design for Columbia Road is in the traffic analysis, we looked at how long the queues are expected to be, the queues of traffic heading southwest on Columbia Road are expected to be in the future condition. And it's projected to be about 700 feet, which takes you back to kind of between 20th Street and Wyoming Avenue. And so we are proposing to have that be the place where the shared bus and bike lane starts. What was previously proposed was at Kalorama Road, as you would have seen in that previous slide. But based on this analysis, it looks like we get the most bang for our buck by having it start at Wyoming. I wanted to talk a little bit about what are the next steps for this project. So right now we're working on the 30% design is what we call it, which is when a lot of the crucial things that are of particular interest to the public will be completed. In order to do that, we need to complete a roadway survey that will inform the drainage impacts and different things like that associated with some of this construction. And then once we have that survey information, we can finalize the roadway geometry, which kind of defines exactly where we can put in things like pedestrian refuges. And, I think that we're looking at 4 or 5 different locations where it should be possible to install a pedestrian refuge. A pedestrian refuge is similar to what you see at Champlain Street right now, where there's a space in the center of Columbia Road to cross. We're looking at shortening over 20 crosswalks through the corridor, as well as looking at some protected intersections, which will further improve safety for the roadway. And so we'll finalize the roadway geometry, and we're also working on a more detailed plan for curbside regulation through the corridor. We got a lot of feedback on the initial proposal regarding conversion of metered parking to loading zones. And so I think we're going to be able to refine the timing around some of that. And then also working on defining, we got a lot of feedback on what's ROP versus RPP. And that's another area where we're going to work to make some further refinements. And then once we have that 30% design, which will kind of include a lot of those details about exactly what the roadway is going to look like, what are going to be the curbside regulations. At that point, we'll issue what we call a notice of intent, which is a formal notice that DDOT must do prior to making changes to traffic operations or curbside regulations. And that will come with a 30 business day comment period. And at that point, as I said, we'll be at 30% design, so not 100% design. So we'll still have time to take comments. We're moving past the planning phase of the project, but public outreach and public feedback is still really important. I think we have a good project here, but with public feedback from people who see the corridor every day, we can make it even better. And then in winter 2024, we will complete the final design, and we are aiming to begin construction in spring of 2024. And you can learn more about the project on the project website, which is buspriority.dc.dc.dc.gov. I'm not going to read all of this, but you can go to that URL. This presentation has been posted there. You can also reach out to me if you have any questions or want to provide feedback. My name again is Kevin Harrison. You can reach me at my email, kevin.harrison@dc.gov, or this is my cell phone number. You can reach out to me that way as well. And that is the end of my presentation. I'll hand it back over to the Planning and Zoning Transportation Committee.
All right. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you very much for those clarifying points. I just have a couple questions, and I'll open it up to my fellow commissioners. You said early on in your presentation that 6,000 people ride the bus through this corridor. Is that per day?
Yes, that's each day.
And then the only other question I had, I noticed the dedicated bus lane heading south, there is like a city bike dock station where it looks like that is going to go through and it's in the street. Would that just be removed, or would it be moved? Is there any plan for that?
We do not have a plan for it at this point, but I'm sure we can find a new location for it.
Okay. I'm going to open it up to the other commissioners now.
Thanks. Do you want to go first, Commissioner? No? Okay. So first, just a couple of points of order. There have been some comments about there not being many public hearings about this. So I just wanted to run you through my timeline of all the different public hearings that we've had on this project from inception to where we are right now. I believe the first time that you reached out to the PZT committee was in late 2021, correct, Kevin? And then the first initial designs were brought before the Committee in Planning, Zoning, and Transportation in February or March of 2022. And then we had you again in June or July of 2022, where the ANC then submitted a resolution. In each of those presentations, we heard you both at the Planning, Zoning, and Transportation Committee, and then also at the full ANC committee, where we had a resolution posted in each of those for public discussion and comments and feedback back from the neighborhood. So by my count, this is now the 7th time that you've come in and spoken before this ANC about this upcoming project. Does that meet your recollection of your interactions with the full committee at this point?
Yeah, that sounds about right. And then, in addition, hanging posters through the corridor, visiting each address on Columbia Road and leaving flyers, attending the Adams Morgan Farmers Market, tabling there, and at the summer concert series in Kalorama Park. Yeah, so there have been additional things outside of that too.
Cool. I've also listed several times that I've reached out to my individual ANC email list for my ANC or for my SMD. I know that this was also covered in the yearly report for the ANC, both in 2021 and in 2022, and that for every single one of these meetings, we posted at least 7 days notice before you were coming up in front of either the ANC or the PZT, including for this meeting where it was listed to the neighborhood list on June 17th that you would be coming to show up here for this Planning, Zoning, and Transportation Committee. So I just wanted to go over that. I understand that there are some people that maybe feel like this is new. That's okay. If you're just hearing about it now, we're still in the process of the planning phase. That's great. But please don't impugn those of us who have been doing a lot of work to go out and talk to the community about it and to hear public feedback about it for now over a year and a half when we have been trying. And I'm glad that you're hearing about it now and that you're wanting to get involved. But please don't spread misinformation, at least about whether or not the ANC is doing the work of trying to make sure that we're representing the neighborhood and hearing the neighborhood views. Next thing, an email went out from one of our citizens associations today that had what it seemed to me every statement of fact is a misrepresentation and or a falsity. And so I just wanted to go through them one by one with you and to take them on one by one. The first is that the plan, it says that it will remove almost all parking on Columbia Road between 16th Street and Connecticut Avenue. Can you just talk about that? Is this plan actually going to remove all parking on Columbia Road between 16th and Connecticut?
No, there are currently 180 parking spaces between 16th Street and Connecticut Avenue, and this project will repurpose about 80 of those spaces. What's currently used for storage of vehicles would be used to provide these improvements.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. I appreciate that. So fewer than 50%, not all. It's also one of the statements was that this plan will reduce the number of bus stops on each side of Columbia Road by 1. Can you talk about why it is that that's the plan and what best practices are now for bus stop spacing in the city and why it is that the city does that?
Yeah, and while we're here, can you still see my screen, the Chrome browser?
Yep,
window?
we got that. Yes.
Okay, I was going to go ahead and open some of these previous presentations that provide some more information on this. This is regarding the concept evaluation that we did. And there's some information on the spacing between the bus stops on Columbia Road. And then also what we're proposing, best practice for bus stop spacing in this sort of context with local bus service is under a quarter mile between each stop. A quarter of a mile is about 1,300 feet. And so we are still well within that, maximum approximate range. Some of these stops are getting more spaced out. About, the longest distance between 18th Street and 17th Street is 1270. And then also the distance between the stop at Ontario and 16th Street is about 1280. So it's within that threshold, and it's for good reasons relating to keeping up bus speed and reliability, and also taking into account where we already have bus shelters and trying to preserve those stops that will be near bus shelters, and where there's next bus arrival information, trying to preserve that to the extent possible.
Great. Thank you. And just a couple more questions. One of the statements that was made by the Citizens Association was that the plan admits that it will not increase travel times through Adams Morgan by bus. But that is in fact one of the primary purposes of this plan, is it not, to increase the travel time through the neighborhood by bus?
Well, it's to decrease the travel time. We want to shorten the travel time for buses. I mentioned that the average speed now is under 6 miles per hour, and we want to bring that up to be something a little bit more efficient. And one of the major sources for delay is that northeast bound approach to 16th Street, and you can go and watch a bus sit in that congestion for 5 minutes. And, we're hoping to bring that down to something much shorter. And so there's major time savings expected as a result of this project. I wish we could do more. It's severely congested between 18th Street and 17th Street as well. But in my experience and in the experience of our other transportation planners and engineers, it's very difficult to change the way that freight loading happens on streets. And, there's really not much opportunity to expand the bus lanes farther than where we have provided them.
Thanks, Kevin. And then one of the other comments is that the plan will put pedestrians at risk of collisions with bicyclists, scooters, and other personal mobility devices. Is there any evidence that where dedicated bike lanes have gone in the city, that it has increased the overall harm to pedestrians in that zone?
There is not. In every city that has studied this, crashes go down, not just for people biking and on micromobility devices, but also for people driving and walking. In every study, it's reflected that the street becomes safer. I actually have a few images that talk a little bit about what's involved in that. I didn't know if this question might come up, but we're expecting the length of the crosswalk this just goes through a few of the primary factors that contribute to improve safety for pedestrians resulting from protected bike lanes. One of the major things is that it makes it possible to shorten the crosswalk in regards to the area where a pedestrian is exposed to being hit by a car, which is pretty much the exclusive source of injuries and fatalities for people walking. And when you shorten a crosswalk, there's a demonstrated reduction in crashes for people walking. The other thing is that the travel lane is set back farther from the crosswalk. So the car approaches the crosswalk at a closer to perpendicular angle. So there's greater visibility of that crosswalk because it's making the turn from a greater distance from the side of it. And the other thing is that it results in tighter turn radiuses. And when you shorten a turn radius, the cars are going faster or cars are going slower. And when cars are going slower, that alone reduces the probability of injury. And it also increases the rate of yielding. So you're less likely to have a car collide with a pedestrian or bicyclist in the first place.
Got it. Thanks, Kevin. So all the evidence tells us, at least the evidence that we have, is that this will increase pedestrian safety, increase the speed with which folks on buses can get through our neighborhood if they're taking public transit. We'll make it safer for people to ride bikes in our neighborhood and use that as their primary source of transportation. And we'll provide a very necessary east-west corridor through the city, linking various bike lanes together, which also happens to reduce our carbon footprint and meet many of our climate goals that we have as a city. And also will give us lots of opportunities to increase pedestrian safety along this corridor as well. Did I pretty much capture it there?
Yeah, I think so. And, you know, really emphasizing the safety aspect of this project. You know, I recognize that there is, you know, high demand for parking in this area and that there is not much parking available in the area. But we also have to acknowledge that there is a pattern of people on bikes and people walking being hit by cars. And as the Department of Transportation, we have a responsibility to try to help that situation, even in places where there is a scarcity of parking.
Thank you. That's all from me, Commissioner Dixon. I appreciate the time.
Excuse me. Thanks for your time, Kevin, and for the presentation. I'm just a few questions here. Can you go into a little more detail about the rationale for the dedicated bus lane approaching Connecticut southbound or westbound? How much of an increase or a decrease in travel time will that achieve? Yeah.
Yeah. So the rationale for this segment of bus lane is based on two things. One is, you know, WMATA data, you know, from the GPS on buses showing that there are significant delays on this approach based on data from before the pandemic, admittedly. The other reason for it is the traffic analysis that's been performed on this segment of roadway. So the existing condition shows, you know, about 150 feet of queuing on the corridor. With the DuPont Deckover and Connecticut Avenue Streetscape project that is coming, the limits of that project extend up to that crosswalk at California Street approximately. And a major part of that project is widening the sidewalks around the, I can't recall the name of the building, the Russian Trade
Mission
building, yeah. Mission there at the corner. Right now, that is not ADA compliant. A wheelchair can't get around that corner. It's too tight, and there's a curb cut there, and so the sidewalk needs to be widened. And in order to do that, we can't continue to have 3 travel lanes on that approach to Connecticut Avenue. And as a result of that, queuing is expected to increase. And so part of the reason for this bus lane is to address congestion that existed in 2019 and that is still coming back, and then also to account for the future condition in which there are fewer travel lanes on that approach. This is something that we're watching closely. We want to make sure that I've heard from many residents that they're concerned about losing parking along this segment. And it's also a concern that, we're doing this we're doing this shared bus and bike lane at the expense of being able to build a protected bike lane. So that's a trade-off. The bus and bike lanes, I think people feel very comfortable in them, but it's not as high quality of a facility as a protected bike lane in terms of attracting users of all ages and all abilities. And so that's a trade-off as well. And so we're watching this closely, and that's going to be something that we're working on in the coming months as we design this facility, determining exactly how long it's appropriate to build this, or what is the appropriate length for this bus and bike lane.
I just want to make sure I understand the drawing here. On Columbia between California and Wyoming, will there be parking or areas for drop-offs or deliveries on either side?
Sorry, that was between Wyoming and California?
Between Wyoming and California, the stretch where it's effectively the stretch where there's the shared bike bus lane.
Yeah, so in this illustration, and this is conceptual design stuff. This is not, we haven't completed survey. The details of this are not final, but it's just illustrative. But it does show parking on the northeast bound side of the street. So pretty much existing condition, starting after the bus stop on the northeast bound side of the street, which is the bottom of the screen. On the top of the screen, there's parking shown between Wyoming and 19th Street, but there is not parking between Wyoming and California Street.
Okay, thank you. So do you take into consideration as you develop these designs, the access to these large condominium buildings and the needs of older residents in those buildings, or the congestion created by deliveries? Is that something that you consider as you make these plans?
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned, freight deliveries often occur wherever is most convenient for the driver, and it can be difficult to stop them even when we have complete and thorough enforcement of the laws. So we do want to make sure that there is a place within reasonable proximity to make those deliveries and do those essential services, and that's why we are preserving parking on one side of the street at least throughout the whole corridor.
There are a lot of good questions in the comments, and I appreciate you staying here and taking those public questions. So I'll pause now, but I may jump on later. Thanks a lot.
Commissioner Stevens, did you have anything to add?
Sorry, I'm having some technical difficulties today. I guess one question is, someone had asked, how will they submit comments during the 30-day period? I'm guessing on the DDOT website that maybe we can send a link to the public to the project information, and then they would submit comments online. Is that how that would work? Or
Generally, when a notice of intent is issued, we provide an email address that comments can be sent to. They can also send hard copies to the DDOT headquarters if they prefer that. And I expect that will be the process for this, email or regular mail.
Okay, and actually that brings me to another question. So in my experience, there's usually some type of actual hearing where people get to submit the written testimony and then testify in person. Is that going to happen somewhere along the line, or how does that work?
No, at this point, we don't have any scheduled public hearings.
Okay.
Yeah, typically the final step is the NOI, and as I said, if anybody, I have my contact information. If anybody would like to provide feedback, would like to speak with me about the project, they can give me a call anytime.
Okay, so it sounds like then primarily email then is the way that the comments should be submitted.
Yeah.
Okay, and then, I mean, I guess I hear the concerns about the parking. I think maybe I'm probably most concerned, and I think I was sort of hearing Commissioner Michelson Horowitz say the same thing, but the delivery portion, so taking into consideration the larger trucks and how they would access a building, what's a commercial establishment or a residence. And I just saw something pop up here, moving trucks, that type of larger vehicle. So I would just ask, to make sure as you go down the design process, design stages, to make sure that those studies are done and let the public know, how that's kind of mapping out. And I guess actually one last thing, the other thing is, again, as you're going through the design process, there was a mention of pre-pandemic studies, but I think you mentioned you were going to sort of regraph some of the things, like do some new studies in terms of those numbers, because it really, it all has changed. I shouldn't say it's all changed, but some of it has changed. So I think I and the public would feel better, if we knew, some of the studies were sort of a redo, if that makes sense. But that would be my last concern.
Yeah, and I'll note that, our traffic analysis looked at pre and post pandemic traffic volumes and ensured that our results were consistent for both. And the bus travel speed, I do have pre and post, and I've actually just recently requested some updated data for that. And yeah, as you mentioned, that is something that we're going to keep working on. Thanks.
If it's all right, Commissioner Dixon, if I can ask a few more questions. Thank you. Do you have data on the usage of the bike lanes as they are, and projections of how they will be used when they are protected?
We do have current numbers on usage. I actually don't know them off the top of my head. I think they're in the neighborhood of about 150 to 200 users per hour at rush hour. But we don't typically do projections for something like this. The focus is more on keeping people safe, and rather than, being too concerned with the growth in volumes. I will say that part of the Connecticut Avenue streetscape project will be adding protected bike lanes to that segment of Connecticut Avenue. So this is going to become a much more valuable segment to get people in the neighborhood down to downtown. This will become kind of the safest way to do that.
Mm-hmm. The priority bus lanes are only as good as they are available for buses. Do you know about the enforcement for that, to keep, for example, delivery trucks that I see often parked on Columbia Road in traffic lanes to keep them from blocking buses?
Yes. So to a large extent, we are dependent on our enforcement partners at DPW and MPD to enforce bus lanes. And, we inform them of when we've got new bus lanes online. And we're also working on getting some more resources for traffic control officers to help with enforcement and education around bus lanes. So not necessarily writing tickets, but letting people know that they need to keep moving and things like that. And then what's new and what's launching in the next few weeks is going to be a program called Clear Lanes, which is where cameras will be installed on buses, and violations will be detected through those cameras, and then they'll be referred to. And so WMATA, Metro Bus, will put that together for us, provide us with the footage of the violation, and then DDOT staff will issue tickets for those violations. So there is going to be much more comprehensive detection of violations and ticketing for violations starting in the next few months. There will be a warning period for violations that occur over the first few months of the program. So people will get a letter in the mail informing them of the violation that was detected, but there will be no ticket for the first few months of the program. But I'm not personally involved in that program, but I can share some information on the WMATA and DDOT programs for that. And the goal, of course, is to not issue any tickets at all. The real priority is keeping bus lanes clear. And then the other thing that's very important about this program is that it will keep bus stop zones clear. When people park in a bus stop zone, they make it impossible for the bus to get to the curb. And they also make it impossible for people in wheelchairs to board the bus. So it has really severe consequences when people are doing that, and it can leave bus customers stranded. And that's a big part of what we're trying to prevent with this program.
Do you have predictions at all about whether this plan will increase or decrease travel time for people in cars from Connecticut to 16th or vice versa?
We do. It's not expected to have a significant impact one way or the other. The plan right now, Columbia Road has one travel lane in each direction, and that will continue to be the case. The space for the protected bike lanes in the bus lane is primarily coming from the reduced amount of parking available.
What during going forward as you take comments, do you respond to comments that you receive? How are they weighted, or what's the feedback mechanism there?
We generally try to respond and acknowledge that it was received. My usual offer is to have a conversation if there's a large number of questions. I think that's a little bit easier a lot of the time. But that's generally the process.
Thank you. Is this plan set in stone at this point, or is there or is there a lot of room both to refine it or to change it dramatically? Like what has been decided at this point, if anything, so that folks know how much their feedback will have an impact.
So we looked at 6 different concepts over the course of 2022, and collected public comment and heard a lot of good feedback. that informed the concept selection. And at this point, you know, we intend to achieve the goals of the project to make it safer for people walking and biking on Columbia Road, and to reduce travel time for people on the bus and better accommodate freight deliveries in the corridor. And, you know, we think that the concept that we've selected is the best way to achieve those goals. And like I said, I think that we have a good project, and I think it can be even better if with more information from the public. So if people have something to share, they should certainly do so. And, you know, we won't persevere blindly if, you know, there's some really valuable information that comes to light. And, you know, I appreciate when people reach out, and, you know, we all want what's best for the neighborhood and for our neighbors and for the district. And it's our responsibility as a public agency to balance the concerns of residents and all the different parties and different stakeholders. And we'll always take that into account. But at this point, you know, will there be, you know, major changes beyond some of the things that I discussed? That's not something that I anticipate, but I certainly, like I said, I'm not going to blindly persevere. You know, I'm working with a project team, and we'll take everything into consideration.
Okay, I want to leave lots of time for the public questions, so I'll stop there. Thanks again, Commissioner Dixon, for letting me speak again.
Yeah, of course. I just had one more question for you, Kevin, and then we're going to open it up. When this project is done and everything has been installed, how closely do you monitor it moving forward to see if it's having the effects that you were hoping it would, and if there's room for change afterwards?
Yeah, we, you know, programmatically evaluate our projects and make sure everything's going well. I will say that it generally takes about a year when there are new traffic patterns established, when there's roadway changes, to really have it fully sink in. So it's not something that, you know, during construction or 3 months or 6 months afterwards that we'll be ready to make any conclusions about at that point. But certainly we evaluate our bus priority projects on a programmatic level to make sure that it's achieving our goals.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. We're going to open this up for broader discussion now. So if anyone has a question or comment, please raise your hands and I will call on you. Greg?
Hi, can you hear me? Hello?
Hey.
Can you hear
Yes.
me?
Yes.
Great, great. I've got one question actually, and then a couple of comments. The question is, in Mr. Harrison's June 5th letter, laying out the favored or preferred concept, there was a bus lane beginning at 19th Street, running from 19th Street to California Street. The slide tonight seems to indicate that that has changed, and it now runs from Wyoming Avenue to California Street. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, then here are my comments. And you know, the commissioners are aware that a neighborhood group sent a letter to them today involving the concerns about the segment basically between 19th and California Street. The observations are, when you talk about pedestrian safety, I've heard nothing about how pedestrian safety would be improved in that segment where there are 6 crosswalks without street signs, you know, no stop signs, no traffic signal, anything. You know, at Wyoming Avenue, there are 2, at 20th Street, there are 2, at California Street, there's 1. And in fact, this would appear to increase the potential harm to pedestrians, because instead of crossing 2 traffic lanes, they would now be crossing 2 traffic lanes plus a bus lane. And there's currently a bike lane in each direction, but they'd also have to cross that dedicated bike lane. So, I think while there are important things about pedestrian safety that may be improved going northeast from 19th Street, it's certainly not improved. And in fact, I would argue is made worse in the segment between basically 19th Street and California Street. My other observation is that I heard repeatedly that the design of the project was to accommodate freight delivery and commercial loading. Those were the 2 terms that were used. And I assume that that's referring to the segment that goes from Belmont up to 16th Street, which is heavily commercial. But I never heard once any concern about deliveries, moving service vehicles, particularly in the segment on Columbia from 19th down to California Street, where curbside residential parking and the opportunity to use that parking for delivery trucks is taken away. So, it seems to me that based on what I've heard, that you're favoring highly, revisions to favor commercial establishments, but no similar concern about the residential segment that we're talking about. And then I'll leave it at that. I mean, those are the 2 major points. Pedestrian safety doesn't appear to be improved. It appears to be worsened in our segment, and definitely the residents are not being accommodated for their essential needs for parking for moving and delivery vehicles and so on, particularly the ones that don't have any rear of building entrances or alleyways. I mean, that segment in the 2000 block, they have no rear entrances at all for that kind of delivery. So, please give the residents at least, the respect and deference that you're trying, and I think probably reasonably so, to the commercial establishments further up Columbia Road. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Greg. Nancy, I see your hand is up.
Thank you. I just have a comment, suggestion, and a question. I want to give something I noticed. I don't remember. Maybe it was 5 or 6 months ago. It could have been 9 months ago. For a while between the little alley on Columbia Road, the area we're talking about, there were white poles that went up to prevent people from pulling over and to probably protect bicycles. They're no longer there. But I think that what happened there is instructive to this situation, because I noticed repeatedly the delivery trucks that used to pull in front of the Schuyler Arms to deliver things to either the, Oakland, my building, the Schuyler Arms, or even across the street, could no longer pull there because these white poles were blocking that area. What happened is that they would then take up either a lane of traffic or they would block the alley. And I saw this repeatedly. And I'm just concerned with this taking away about deliveries and what, ever. I also have seen over the past 2 years, many spaces taken away. And I'm thinking in front of the little triangle there near the embassy, and I keep calling it Shirley Temple's building because she lived there. I forget the name of that building, but there used to be room for 4 spaces, and now there's room for only 2. And I don't know if that was to help with turning and transportation, but there are places that have been eliminated the parking already that had nothing to do with the bus lane project. And I'm wondering if there's any thought to restore some of this. I will also say finally is that I have been a big public transportation user, the 43, the 42, the L2, the 46, for 40 years. And I'm also a huge walker. And I see definitely a problem on the other side of 18th Street with congestion, but I have not witnessed the bicycle traffic that I hear that's being cited, congestions when I'm on the bus or when the bus is. In fact, sometimes I wish there had been congestion so I could make the bus. But I'm not able to. So I'm very puzzled why, and it's not just because it's my block, but I am puzzled why this residential area, because as Greg said, it does seem to kind of favor the commercial, and there needs to be a balance. Thank you very much. And also, thank you for coming into this. We really didn't get mail notices or the mailing list. So I do feel a little poorly for you, because I know that all of you have been working hard in so many ways, and you probably feel like you've come into a den of lions, but this is going to affect us significantly. And I do believe that many people have begun, once they heard about this, to pay serious attention and try to give you feedback constructively. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Nancy and Greg. Nancy and Greg, thank you so much for your respectful and thoughtful comments. Kevin, I thought maybe we could take this moment for you to maybe respond to those. There seemed to be some pretty important questions that they raised up.
So I'll address a few of them. One of them is around the white poles, or we call them flex posts, that took away some of the parking along the corridor. That is based on a desire to improve visibility for pedestrians, so that people walking can more easily see when there's a car coming, and so that when cars approaching a crosswalk can more easily see people walking. Also, so that when a car is parked, or when a car is accessing a parallel parking space, it shouldn't be necessary to maneuver into that space from within a crosswalk. So that's the reason why DDOT, as a matter of policy, does not allow parking within 25 feet of a crosswalk. Is the reason why those flex posts went in. And it was part of an effort to improve pedestrian safety on Columbia Road. I can't remember exactly when they went in, but in the last couple of years. Regarding and I will say that the decision as to where parking should be prohibited versus where those flex posts should be installed, I think that there is a way to prohibit parking in many spaces where it can block visibility, but we can also try to steer those deliveries into no parking spaces where they're less harmful in terms of visibility and things like that, but that are within the policy that aims to preserve visibility. In terms of pedestrian safety between 19th Street and California Street or Connecticut Avenue, we are greatly shortening many of these crosswalks, and it is increasing the offset distance between the travel lane and the crosswalk to improve visibility for cars making turns, as I kind of discussed earlier. We're also looking at potentially installing a pedestrian refuge at 19th Street. That will be pending survey on the corridor and some further analysis around the impacts of that, but it's something we're going to be looking at. I think there's one crosswalk that goes across the proposed bus lane. I think the length of the crosswalk in which a pedestrian would be exposed to car traffic is about the same before and after. But we will continue to look at ways to further make improvements to safety on this project. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice. Which always seems to happen when I start talking a lot. And in terms of delivery access, through most of the corridor, parking is being preserved on only one side of the street. And that is true for the commercial areas, and also true for the residential areas here on the western end of the corridor. And, that's still within, you routinely see deliveries being made across the street. It's something that can be done and from around the corner. And so I think there's generally opportunities to make deliveries. I mean, this is a major city, and there's not always accommodation right in front of your destination to make deliveries and load and unload. So I don't think that this should be a terrible surprise to deliveries being made within this corridor.
All right, thank you, Kevin. Tracy.
Hi.
Hi, Tracy.
We're located in the 2000 block of Columbia Road on the side of the street that would be impacted by the elimination of residential parking and the installation of a dedicated priority bus lane. We are a residential condo building with no access. There's no alley access. We abut the condos on Wyoming. We have, as is required, private trash pickup, as does every single building on the 2000 block of Columbia Road, other than the 2007, which is located immediately next door. We have a multitude of residents in this block. And my question is, how, when a resident moves out of my building, which is 2009, or the trash and recycling come to be picked up, how will a moving truck or a trash pickup, how will they be able to do that with a dedicated bus lane? I think personally it's slightly impractical to have someone walk up 3 flights of steps to move a 3-bedroom, 3.5 bath condo around the block. And I'm very concerned about the impact that this will have on the residents, because vendors will probably park in those bus lanes, our trash pickup or moving trucks, and they'll just build it into the price that they charge to residents. Has there been any thought about trash pickup or moving or Uber drop off or pickup?
All right, thank you, Tracy.
Yeah, so garbage collection is permitted in a bus lane. It's, work that has to happen. Same for tree trimming and any number of work type activities that, must occur in that lane. There's really not an alternative. In terms of moving, I would have to look in to see whether it's possible to get a emergency no parking permit in front of a building where there's a bus lane. It might have to be on the weekend or something. I'd have to look into that. But otherwise, yes, it might have to be around the corner or across the street.
Great, thank you, Kevin. Peter, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Hi, Peter. Yes, we can.
Great, thank you. I wanted to raise a couple of things. One on the southeast side of the road, the odd numbered blocks where the protected bike lane is proposed. Our concern is that, so we're at 2006, the alley runs between our building and the Schuyler Arms back to the Adams Oyster School. Our concern is that by pushing the parked cars further out into Columbia Road, you're actually reducing visibility for traffic coming in and out of the alley. And there are a lot of service vehicles for the school that come in and out of that alley. There are heavy trash trucks that come back to the school and to the Wyoming. No loading is permitted in the alley, mind you, because it is a fire lane. So we have concerns for particularly some of the vehicles that have to back out into Columbia Road. Their visibility is actually to be obstructed by this, not improved. So we need to take that into consideration. Also, we'd like to know what is the plan for the construction of this protected bike lane? Is it Jersey barriers? Is it flex posts? What's in mind here? All we see is a green line.
Yeah. So thanks for flagging that about the alley and its operations there. I'll definitely make sure to bring that back to the design team to make sure they take a look at. In terms of what the protected bike lane will be made out of. So right here, it's shown like in green. It will not be green. It will just be the regular pavement color, except for in locations where there's a possibility of conflict. There will be the kind of dashing like you see.
Is it white posts or is it Jersey barriers?
It will be white posts with concrete wheel stops. It could be, so wheel stops they're kind of the 5 to 6 inch tall concrete blocks that range in width from 8 to 24 inches. And it will be some combination of flex posts and concrete blocks.
Okay. In terms of the project timing, excuse me, have you given any consideration to the other projects going on concurrently in the neighborhood with your timing? Specifically, the proposed renovation of the Adams Oyster School and the redevelopment of the Universal North and South buildings. To our knowledge, no provisions have been made in the plans for either of those projects or for this project for adding any parking. And so we're concerned where are construction workers going to park? And by doing this project at the same time, it's going to make a bad situation even worse.
I appreciate you flagging that concern. As I mentioned, there's also the additional construction coming next year of the Connecticut Avenue streetscape project.
That's been called in question, hasn't it?
I believe they are proceeding in 2024. There's the Connecticut Avenue bike lane project farther north, like north of Calvert, north of Woodley Park. That might be what you're thinking of. The one that's the deck over of the DuPont Circle and then protected bike lanes from DuPont Circle up to Columbia Road should be proceeding next year. Yeah, when it comes time to schedule, we'll certainly be taking a look at all of that. This is like a sort of
Our
a lighter lift.
recommendation is that this be delayed for substantial rethinking and for consideration of that scheduling conflict.
Thanks. And the thing about this project is it's considerably lighter construction. It's restriping primarily and using modular materials.
Right,
will
but
be
you're
some
going to
concrete
constrain the
poured.
traffic, remove parking, and constrict traffic on Columbia Road at the same time, where the traffic on this segment is going to increase substantially.
We should be able to preserve two-way travel at all times on Columbia Road. I'm fairly certain that we will. But that will be contained. I'll make sure to provide more details of that in the notice of intent.
Has the city given any consideration of the reduction in property values of these homes in these blocks that's going to result from the elimination of additional parking?
We're not assuming any reduction in property values.
Yeah, that's a false assumption.
Given the fact that property values in this neighborhood have gone up substantially over the last decade, I think it is incredibly just speculative to think that there would be any resulting loss of property values because of this project. Many people want increased transportation through bike lanes and other means, and those folks will offset whatever reduction is made from folks that don't want to purchase because of a lack of vehicle traffic.
All right, thanks everyone. Dennis James. Dennis, you're on mute.
Am I heard now?
Yes.
So a question for Kevin, and I'd like obviously to stay on after I hear his response. Actually, 2 points. Is it correct that pedestrians boarding buses will cross the bike lane to a concrete raised strip? That's the one. And then what is the situation on the commercial parts of Columbia Road between 16th and 18th? My understanding from your first set of plans, which the Calorama citizens used to make its initial comments, which I did post today because I haven't seen any other plans until now. It seems that those businesses are going to be hard hit by removal of parking. And, you could be sentencing those small businesses to death by removing the ability for their customers to park near them, particularly the ones between Ontario and Champlain on the southwest, opposite Safeway and CVS. So that's 2 points I'd like to hear the answer and possibly make a response.
Yes, these will most likely be what we refer to as shared stops, where the bike lane crosses the bus boarding area. It's a type of bus boarding platform that we've been constructing around in different parts of the district, and it's most likely what will be here. In terms of exactly what the materials are that are used, that will be determined based on the survey that's going to be underway shortly. In terms of the parking between 16th and did you say 7? I'm not sure which street were your kind of bounding streets for your question, but the proposal does remove parking between 17th Street and 16th Street. We're sensitive to the impacts of reduced parking along that stretch, and we're working with the business community on how best to to accommodate their needs with the curbside regulations on the remaining parking.
Okay, so I'd like to, am I still being heard?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. So again, for Kevin, if I'm getting on a bus and a bicycle is coming along in the bike lane, what's going to make it stop? For me, especially with the idiotic rule that the council passed, the so-called Idaho stop, say it's at a stop sign that the bus stop is located, or maybe a red light, a situation with a traffic signal, but perhaps the bicyclist can't see it because the bus is stopped right at the intersection. So it seems to me that you're putting pedestrians at risk by making them cross, the bike lane. And I got to say, many bike riders are very entitled. They don't give a damn about anything. They just blast through stop signs and red lights all over the place, regardless of what's coming.
Yeah, and that's a concern that we've heard from others as well. We've been attending meetings of the Accessibility Advisory Commission for WMATA, and also the equivalent for the district council, and discussing the design for these shared bus stops with them. And we've also been going out and doing observations, noting that this is something different than what's been constructed in the district before. At this point, our team has spent hundreds of hours actually making observations at these bus stops, taking seriously this concern that's been expressed. And there's actually very little interaction for the most part between people boarding and getting off of buses and people passing on bikes. And is the overwhelming thing. And then when there is those rare moments when somebody's trying to board a bus and a bike is passing at the same time, people get along and they yield to each other and they behave appropriately. We're posting signage at all of these locations, informing people that they need to stop for bicyclists. And there's also signage on both sides of the bike lane as you approach the bus stop, creating this gateway effect. There's a ramp up to slow down people on bikes. And there are a lot of steps that have been taken to mitigate the risks, and also acknowledge that these shared stops, they're a little bit of a compromise, but the alternative is to have cars parking in the protected bike lane. And our approach to these projects is that protected bike lanes don't have to stop where the bus stop starts. We should be providing protection all the way across it, and not creating dangerous situations where bikes are having to navigate around buses, picking up passengers, and also navigate around cars that are parked in the bike lane at the bus stop. And what I've heard talking to riders is that they can more reliably, or the bus can more often get to the curb when we build those shared stops than when there's nothing. And so it ends up being a situation where the bus can't reach the curb, so that people with mobility impairments can board the bus. So, from what we've seen, it's been a win-win. It's been an improvement for people with mobility challenges, and also for ensuring that the bike lanes remain protected.
All right, thank you very much, Kevin. Could you put up the screen again, or the slide that has your contact information? I'm going to ask everyone, if you haven't already, please write down his email address. Please write down the bus priority project, or just take an image of the screen with your smartphone so you have this information. It sounds like the best way to move forward is to contact Kevin directly about this project. And I think we've had a really fantastic discussion tonight, and have talked about some really important community concerns. And I just want to make it clear, before this meeting, Kevin and I did have a lengthy discussion. I'd spoken to a few people who were on this call and other people within my SMD And even between that conversation and now, there have been alterations to the plan that have, been an improvement based on those conversations. So Kevin, thank you very much for being so amenable, and, just being here and present and answering all these questions. We look forward to seeing where this project goes. And I hope that you hear from more people with their input so we can move this project forward in a helpful way for everyone. Greg?
Yes, Lee, thank you. Is there any future role for the ANC to be engaged in advocacy around some of the concerns that have been raised tonight? Thank you.
Kevin, my understanding is that we've already submitted the letter of support. I don't know, beyond you coming to these meetings, what the ANC would do if what you're seeking is community feedback, right, directly from people who are in this zone.
Yeah, I mean, well, certainly I welcome the ANC's feedback at any point. And part of the formal notice of intent process is that you all are the recipients of that letter as the ANC. And any feedback that you provide during that comment period, the legal requirement is that it receive great weight. And that's, also a good way of describing it, is that it's very important to know, the position of the ANC as elected officials at the most granular level representing the neighborhood.
All right, great. Thank you so much. This has been a fantastic meeting. Thank you everyone for coming. And please reach out to Kevin with any more concerns or questions you have. Thank you and have a wonderful night, everyone.